She looks like she raided a Goodwill camping section. Someone should tell her this isn't a homeless shelter. It's a serious hiking group. The laughter rippled through the trailhead parking lot like a wave. 14 people in pristine gear, matching water bottles, color coordinated backpacks, all of them looking at me, all of them laughing. I adjusted the strap on my pack. The canvas was faded, the buckles were scratched, the boots on my feet had more miles on them than most of these people had driven in their lives. I didn't say anything I never do. If you've ever been judged by people who mistake price tags for competence, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. My name is Grace Sterling. I'm 53 years old. And up until 30 seconds ago, I was just another middle-aged woman trying to enjoy a Saturday morning on the Blue Ridge Trail system. Now I'm standing in a circle of strangers who have already decided exactly who I am and exactly how much I matter. They don't know that yet. The woman leading the laughter was named Tiffany Marsh, 25 years old, 200,000 followers on Instagram, sponsored by 3 outdoor brands whose logos covered her jacket like NASCAR decals. Her hiking boots had never touched mud. Her backpack still had the tags tucked inside the front pocket. I could see the white edge poking out. She ran these trail meetups every month. Adventure with Tiffany, $40 a head. Professional photographer included. The whole thing was less about hiking and more about content creation. I hadn't known that when I signed up. I just wanted to walk. Seriously, though, Tiffany said, loud enough for everyone to hear. She pulled out her phone and pointed it at my feet. Can we talk about those boots? What are those, like Vietnam-era surplus? More laughter. The boots were Danner Mountain Light 2s, 18 years old, resoled twice. The leather was scarred and faded to a pale brown that had once been chestnut. There was a dark stain near the left toe that wouldn't come out no matter how many times I treated it. That stain was blood, not mine. I got them at REI, I said quietly. A long time ago. REI? Tiffany's eyebrows shot up. Girl, REI has upgraded since whatever decade you're living in. Have you seen the new Salomon X Ultra 4s? She lifted her foot, showing off a pristine boot that probably cost $400. Waterproof, breathable, GPS-compatible insole. GPS-compatible insole, I repeated. It tracks your steps and syncs with your phone, so you can see exactly where you've been. I knew exactly where I'd been. I didn't need an insole to remind me. The Korengal Valley, the Hindu Kush, the triple canopy jungle of the Amazon basin where sunlight didn't reach the ground, and the humidity made every breath feel like drowning. I'd walked point through terrain that would have killed everyone in this parking lot. I'd navigated by stars and compass when satellites were compromised. I'd carried wounded operators on my back through 9 miles of hostile territory because the extraction helicopter couldn't land. But I didn't say any of that. I adjusted my pack and waited for the group to start moving. Growing up in the Sterling household meant earning attention the hard way. My father was a postal worker. My mother cleaned houses. We lived in a 3-bedroom ranch in eastern Tennessee where the winters were cold and the summers were thick with mosquitoes. Nothing special, nothing memorable. I was the middle child, the quiet one between 2 louder siblings who demanded space and got it. I learned early that silence was safer than asking for things. I learned to move through rooms without being noticed, to finish my dinner without comment, to need nothing and expect less. When I enlisted at 19, nobody was surprised. When I qualified for Special Forces support at 24, nobody was impressed. When I deployed the first time, nobody asked where I was going. They just assumed it was somewhere administrative, somewhere safe. Grace works in logistics, my mother told the neighbors. She handles paperwork for the Army. She wasn't wrong, technically. I did handle paperwork. The paperwork just happened to be mission briefs, extraction coordinates, and after action reports classified above the clearance level of most generals. But I never corrected her. I never corrected anyone. Some things grow more powerful the quieter they are. I retired as a chief warrant officer 3 years ago, 31 years of service, 4 combat deployments, 2 Bronze Stars, 1 Silver Star that I've never shown anyone. Now I live in a cabin outside Asheville. I grow tomatoes. I read books. I take long walks on trails where nobody knows my name and nobody asks questions. That's how I ended up here at a $40 Instagram hiking meetup. With a woman half my age mocking my boots, the group started moving. 14 hikers plus Tiffany plus the photographer who was already positioning himself for the optimal angle. The trail wound upward through mixed hardwoods, oak, maple, hickory. The morning light filtered through the canopy in golden shafts. It would have been beautiful if I could have enjoyed it. Instead, I was listening to Tiffany narrate. Okay, everyone, we're going to stop at the first overlook for our group photo. Make sure your gear is visible for the sponsors. And remember, adventure is an attitude. She said this directly into her phone, which was mounted on a selfie stick attached to her pack. A small ring light illuminated her face, even though we were outdoors in full daylight. I fell to the back of the group. That was fine. I preferred the back. You could see more from the back. You could watch the terrain, monitor the group, notice the things that everyone else missed. Old habits. The trail climbed steadily for the first mile. I watched Tiffany's followers struggle. They had the expensive boots, the technical fabrics, the GPS-compatible insoles. What they didn't have was conditioning. By the time we reached the first switchback, 3 of them were breathing hard. By the second switchback, 2 had stopped to rest. Tiffany didn't notice. She was too busy filming. This is the real adventure, guys. Pushing your limits, finding your edge. Remember, nature doesn't care about your excuses. She was right about that last part, at least. I kept climbing. My boots found the stones and roots without effort. Muscle memory from 1,000 trails in 100 countries. My pack sat balanced on my hips. The weight distributed the way I'd learned to distribute it when the weight was ammunition and medical supplies instead of water bottles and trail mix. The first overlook appeared around a bend, a small clearing with a wooden railing and a view of the valley below. The mountains rolled outward in waves of green and blue, fading into morning haze. Beautiful. Tiffany was already arranging the group for the photo. Okay, tall people in the back, make sure your brand patches are showing, and someone tell the lady with the sad boots to stand off to the side. She's throwing off the aesthetic. The photographer, a young man named Derek who had said maybe 6 words all morning, glanced at me apologetically. I stepped to the side without comment. The photo took 15 minutes. 15 minutes of adjusting angles, changing poses, reviewing shots on the camera's small screen. Tiffany directed the whole thing like a general commanding troops, except her troops were civilians who had paid for the privilege of being ordered around. I stood apart and watched the trail. That's when I noticed them. 3 figures coming up the path from the direction we'd come. They moved differently than hikers, controlled, alert. Their eyes swept the terrain in patterns I recognized immediately. 2 men and 1 woman, all in civilian clothes that fit too well to be casual. Security detail. Behind them, a 4th figure, older, gray hair, expensive hiking gear that had actually seen use. He moved with the careful confidence of someone who had learned to walk in difficult places. I knew him. I knew him, and my heart stopped. The group finished their photo. Tiffany was already talking about the next overlook, the next opportunity for content, the next sponsored moment. She didn't notice the approaching figures until they were almost at the clearing. "Oh," she said, lowering her phone for the first time all morning. "More hikers. Let's make room, everyone." The security detail entered the clearing first. Their eyes swept the group, assessed, categorized, dismissed. One of them, the woman, lingered on me for a half a second longer than the others. I saw the recognition flash across her face, the slight widening of her eyes, the almost imperceptible nod. Then he stepped into the clearing. Senator Richard Caldwell, Virginia, 12 years in office, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, father of three because I had carried him through 9 miles of jungle with a bullet in his shoulder and cartel forces closing from 3 directions. His eyes found me immediately. I watched his face change. The polite public smile dropped. Something deeper replaced it, something raw and real and heavy with memory. "Chief Sterling," he said. The clearing went silent. Tiffany's phone was still recording. The photographer's camera was still clicking. 14 hikers in pristine gear stood frozen, watching a United States senator walk past all of them toward the woman in the worn-out boots. I straightened slightly. Old habits. "Senator Caldwell." He stopped 2 feet in front of me. His security detail had fanned out, creating a subtle perimeter. Professional, competent. They knew exactly who I was. They had files on me. They had probably studied me. "I never got to thank you," he said quietly, "for the Amazon extraction." The words hung in the air. I saw Tiffany's expression change. Confusion becoming curiosity, becoming something that looked almost like fear. "You were doing your job, Senator. I was doing mine. My children have a father because of you." His voice cracked slightly on the word father. "I've wanted to say that for 3 years. I've written letters. I've made calls. They kept telling me your location was classified. It was. You walked point through hostile territory for 9 hours with me on your back. You neutralized." He stopped himself, glanced at the hikers, lowered his voice. "You did things that night that no one will ever be able to acknowledge publicly, and you've never asked for anything in return. I don't ask for things, Senator." He shook his head slowly, then he extended his hand. I took it. His grip was firm. His eyes were wet. "Ma'am," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you walked where angels fear to tread." Behind me, I heard a camera click. I heard Tiffany's sharp intake of breath. I heard 14 people in sponsored gear suddenly realizing that the woman with the sad boots was someone they had catastrophically misjudged. The senator held my hand for a long moment. Then he released it and turned to his security detail. "Chief Sterling is a national treasure," he said simply. "Whatever she needs on this trail, she gets." One of the detail members, a man with the build of a former operator, stepped forward. His eyes moved to my boots, not with mockery, with recognition. "Danner Mountain Light 2s, he said quietly. "Had a pair just like them. Korengal Valley, 2009. I nodded. "Good boots. The best." Tiffany's phone was still recording. I could see her processing, recalculating, trying to figure out how to spin this for her followers. The woman she'd mocked for her cheap gear was being treated like visiting royalty by a sitting senator. "Chief Sterling," she said, her voice pitched higher than before. "I don't think I caught your full title. What exactly did you—" The senator turned. His face had changed again. The warmth he'd shown me replaced by something cold and flat. "Chief Warrant Officer Grace Sterling, retired, Army Special Forces support, 31 years of service." He paused. "Her boot size is classified. Her operations are classified. The only thing you need to know is that she's done more for this country in a single night than most people do in a lifetime." The security detail was watching Tiffany now. All 3 of them. Professional assessment, quiet threat. "And her boots," the senator added, "have walked through places your GPS-compatible insoles couldn't even track, because those places don't exist on any map you'd have access to." Tiffany's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time all morning, she had nothing to say. The silence stretched across the overlook like a held breath. 14 hikers in pristine gear stood frozen, their expensive boots rooted to the dirt. Tiffany's ring light was still on, casting its artificial glow across her face, but she had lowered the selfie stick to her side. The recording continued. She didn't seem to know how to stop it. I watched her process what had just happened, the calculations running behind her eyes, the influencer's instinct kicking in. How do I salvage this? How do I spin this? How do I turn this into content that doesn't destroy me? She didn't understand yet. She thought this was a story about embarrassment, about being caught mocking the wrong person. It wasn't. It was a story about the difference between performance and service, between loud and real. Senator Caldwell was still standing close to me. His security detail had shifted into a looser formation now that they'd assessed the clearing and found no threats. The woman, the one who had recognized me first, was watching Tiffany with an expression I knew well, the quiet contempt of someone who had earned everything they had for someone who had earned nothing. "Grace," the senator said quietly, using my first name for the first time, "I need to tell you something about that night." I met his eyes. "Senator, you don't owe me anything. I owe you everything." He glanced at his detail, then back at me. When we got to the extraction point, and I was finally conscious enough to understand what had happened, they told me the mission parameters. They told me what you did. I said nothing. "You weren't supposed to come back for me." The words landed like stones dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward. Tiffany had stepped closer, phone still recording, trying to catch whatever revelation was coming. "The original extraction was compromised," the senator continued. "Cartel forces had the coordinates. The helicopter couldn't land. Command made the call to write me off." He swallowed hard. "They classified me as acceptable losses." I remembered that moment. The crackle of the radio, the voice of my commanding officer telling me to proceed to secondary extraction, to leave the senator where he was, to save the team. I remembered the choice. "You disobeyed a direct order," he said. "You told command that the radio had malfunctioned, that you didn't receive the abort signal. You carried me 9 miles through hostile jungle, knowing that if you were caught, you'd be court-martialed. If you were killed, you'd be disavowed." "The radio did malfunction," I said. He almost smiled. "Thermal override. That's what the after-action report said. Equipment failure due to thermal override in the receiver unit." I felt the familiar weight of those words, thermal override. The phrase I had used to explain why my radio had gone silent at the exact moment when command ordered me to abandon a United States senator to die in the jungle. The phrase was a lie. The radio worked fine. I just stopped listening. "I've read your file," the senator said. "What little of it isn't redacted. I know you were recommended for the Medal of Honor. I know it was downgraded to a Silver Star because the mission couldn't be officially acknowledged. I know you've never spoken publicly about any of it. There's nothing to speak about, Senator. I did my job. Your job was to follow orders. You followed something else instead." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. A coin. Challenge coin. Military tradition. Given from one service member to another as a mark of respect and shared experience. This one was different. This one had the seal of the Senate Intelligence Committee on one side, and on the other, engraved in small letters, "For those who walk where angels fear to tread." "I had this made," he said. "I've been carrying it for 3 years, hoping I'd find you someday." He placed it in my palm. The metal was warm from his pocket, heavy, real. I closed my fingers around it and said nothing. Tiffany had moved closer still, close enough now that her phone's microphone would pick up every word, close enough that her followers, however many were watching live, would hear whatever came next. "Excuse me," she said, her voice pitched to sound friendly and curious rather than demanding. "Senator Caldwell, I'm Tiffany Marsh. I run Adventure with Tiffany, 200,000 followers. I'd love to get a quick interview about your connection to Chief Sterling for my audience, you know. This is such an inspiring story." The senator turned to look at her. I watched his face change. The warmth drained out. The politician's mask dropped. What remained was something I recognized from the jungle: the cold, flat assessment of a man who had faced death and learned to identify threats. "Ms. Marsh," he said, "10 minutes ago, I watched you mock this woman. I watched you point your phone at her boots and invite your followers to laugh at her. I watched you tell her to stand off to the side because she was throwing off the aesthetic." Tiffany's smile flickered. It was a joke. I didn't know. You didn't know? The senator nodded slowly. You didn't know that the woman you were mocking has saved more lives than you have followers. You didn't know that those boots have walked through places your GPS couldn't map because the satellites were jammed. You didn't know that the stain on her left toe is blood from a teammate she carried for 6 miles after an IED took his legs. The clearing had gone completely silent. Even the birds seemed to have stopped. "But here's what troubles me, Ms. Marsh." The senator's voice was quiet now, controlled, more dangerous for its restraint. "You didn't know any of that, and you mocked her anyway. You made her the punchline of your content. You dismissed her based on the age of her gear and the wear on her boots." "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did." He stepped closer to Tiffany. His security detail didn't move. They didn't need to. "You meant exactly what you said. And now you want to pivot. You want to turn this into content. You want to interview me about my inspiring connection to the woman you were laughing at 30 minutes ago." Tiffany's phone was shaking slightly. The ring light cast harsh shadows across her face. "The answer is no," the senator said. "And if I see any footage from today used in a way that misrepresents Chief Sterling or attempts to rehabilitate your treatment of her, I will personally ensure that every sponsor on your jacket receives a detailed briefing about what happened here." The phone lowered. Tiffany's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied outdoor makeup. "I'm sorry," she said. The words came out small, thin. I shouldn't have." She looked at me for the first time. Not as content, not as a punchline, as a person she had wronged. I met her eyes, held them, said nothing. There is a silence that forgives, and there is a silence that remembers. She understood which one this was. One of the security detail members, the former operator who had recognized my boots, stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said to me, "we're heading up to the summit overlook. Private trail access. The senator would be honored if you'd join us." I looked at the group of hikers I had paid $40 to walk with, at their pristine gear and their confused faces and their phones that were all recording now, documenting something they didn't fully understand. Then I looked at the trail ahead, the private path that wound up toward the summit. "Thank you," I said. "I'd like that." The senator nodded. "Lead the way, Chief Sterling." I started walking. The security detail fell in around me, not around the senator, around me. The formation shift was deliberate, a message to everyone watching. Behind us, I heard Tiffany's voice, smaller than it had been all morning. The hike is continuing. Everyone follow me to the next overlook." No one moved. I didn't look back. The trail to the summit was steeper than the main path, rougher, the kind of terrain that required actual skill to navigate rather than just expensive equipment. My boots found the stones and roots without effort. The rhythm was familiar, comfortable. The senator walked beside me. His security detail maintained their perimeter. Professional, alert, but relaxed now. We were among allies. You know, he said after a few minutes of climbing, I tried to find you after I recovered. I wanted to testify. I wanted to make sure you received proper recognition. I received what I needed, Senator. A silver star that can't be displayed, a commendation that can't be discussed, a career that ended quietly in a cabin outside Asheville. That's more than most people get. He was silent for a moment. The trail wound upward through a stand of old-growth hemlocks. The air was cooler here, cleaner. Do you regret it? He asked. Any of it? I thought about the question. 31 years of service, 4 combat deployments, missions that would never be declassified, teammates who were buried under stars that bore the wrong names, the weight of secrets that would outlive me. I regret the friends I lost, I said. I regret the orders I couldn't follow. I regret the letters I had to write to families who couldn't be told how their sons and daughters really died. I adjusted my pack. The canvas creaked softly. But I don't regret the choices I made, including the one that brought you home. The senator nodded. He understood. He had been there. He had seen what I was capable of when the radio went silent and the mission parameters changed, and the only thing left was the choice between orders and conscience. We climbed in silence for a while. The summit overlook appeared through the trees, a rocky outcrop with a view that stretched for 50 miles in every direction. Mountains and valleys and morning light painting everything gold. Beautiful. The security details spread out across the overlook, establishing their positions with practiced efficiency. The senator and I stood at the edge, looking out at a country that would never know what we had done to protect it. Chief Sterling, he said finally, I'm going to ask you something and I want you to consider it carefully before you answer. I waited. The committee is forming a new task force. Oversight and advisory, we need people who understand operations from the ground level. People who have walked the walk, as it were. I'm retired, Senator. I know. But retirement doesn't have to mean silence. He turned to look at me. You've spent 31 years being invisible, being the secret weapon no one knew existed. What if you could do something different? What if you could help shape the next generation of people like you? I thought about my cabin, my tomatoes, my books, the quiet life I had built in the space left behind when the mission stopped. Then I thought about Tiffany Marsh, about the 14 hikers in pristine gear who would go home today and tell stories about what they had witnessed, about the young people watching her videos who had learned to measure worth by price tags and follower counts. I'll think about it, I said. The senator smiled. That's all I ask. We stood there for a long moment, 2 people who had survived something terrible and found each other again on a mountaintop in North Carolina. The morning light was full now. The valleys below were waking up. Senator, the female security agent said, approaching quietly, we should move soon. You have the 11 o'clock briefing. He nodded. Then he turned to me one last time. You know what I remember most about that night in the jungle? It wasn't the pain. It wasn't the fear. It was your voice. I looked at him. You kept talking to me, he said. The whole 9 miles. You told me about your cabin, about the tomatoes you were going to grow when you retired, about the trails you were going to walk when no one was shooting at you. His voice caught. You kept me alive with stories about a quiet life, and I promised myself that if I survived, I would find you. I would thank you, and I would make sure you got to live that quiet life. He reached out and gripped my shoulder. Ma'am, he said, you've more than earned your peace. Whatever you decide about the task force, know that this country owes you a debt it can never repay. Then he turned and walked toward the trail, his security detail falling in around him. I stayed at the overlook, alone, looking out at the mountains. Behind me, somewhere down the main trail, Tiffany Marsh was probably still leading her group to the next photo opportunity, still performing, still measuring worth in likes and follows and sponsored content. She would post something tonight. I was certain of that. Influencers always did. She would spin it somehow, frame herself as the humble learner, the person who had been taught an important lesson about judging others. It would probably get a lot of engagement. But here's what she would never understand. Some stories don't fit in a content calendar. Some experiences can't be monetized. Some people walk through places that don't exist on any map, and they come back changed in ways that no algorithm can measure. I looked down at my boots, Danner Mountain Light 2s, 18 years old, scarred and faded and stained with blood that would never come out. They had carried me through jungles and mountains and deserts. They had walked point on missions that would remain classified for decades. They had brought a senator home to his children and carried teammates to extraction when helicopters couldn't land. They weren't GPS compatible. They didn't sync with my phone, but they knew exactly where they had been. And so did I. I reached into my pocket and felt the weight of the challenge coin. The metal was still warm, the engraved words pressed against my palm. For those who walk where angels fear to tread. I had walked those places. I had earned this, and I had never needed anyone to know. The trail down from the summit was quieter than the trail up. The senator and his detail had taken a different route. Private access, secure transport, waiting at a trailhead I had never seen on any public map. We had exchanged numbers. He had repeated his offer about the task force. I had repeated that I would think about it. Then he was gone. I took the long way back. The main trail wound through stands of mountain laurel and across a small creek that ran cold and clear over mossy stones. The morning had warmed. The light had shifted from gold to white. It was shaping up to be a beautiful day. I didn't see Tiffany's group again until I reached the parking lot. They were clustered around their vehicles. Pristine SUVs and crossovers with bike racks and roof boxes that had never been used. The photographer was packing his equipment. Several of the hikers were already in their cars, engines running, air conditioning on. Tiffany was standing apart from the others. She was looking at her phone. Her face was pale. I walked to my truck, a 15-year-old Toyota Tacoma with rust around the wheel wells and a camper shell that had seen better decades. I unlocked the door and set my pack on the passenger seat. Chief Sterling. I turned. Tiffany was walking toward me. Her expensive boots scuffed against the gravel. Her ring light was off. Her selfie stick was packed away. She looked smaller than she had that morning, younger. I need to say something, she said. I waited. I deleted the footage. She held up her phone. Everything from this morning. The jokes about your boots, the stuff at the Overlook, all of it, gone. I said nothing. I'm not. She stopped, swallowed, started again. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I'm not going to use any of this. I'm not going to spin it or monetize it or turn it into content. Her voice was shaking slightly, real emotion, maybe for the first time all day. I've been doing this for 3 years, she said, building the brand, growing the following, getting the sponsors. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that the people I was filming were actual people with actual lives, with actual stories that I knew nothing about. She looked down at her pristine boots. I've never walked anywhere that mattered, she said quietly. I've never done anything that mattered. I just perform and I film myself performing and I tell people to like and subscribe. Her eyes came up to meet mine. I'm so sorry for what I said, for all of it. I studied her for a long moment, the expensive gear, the perfect hair, the carefully curated aesthetic that was starting to crack around the edges. Tiffany, I said. She straightened, bracing for whatever came next. You didn't want the truth this morning. You wanted a punchline. You wanted content that would make your followers feel superior to someone. She nodded, accepting it. But here's what you need to understand. I stepped closer. I've been dismissed by people far more powerful than you. I've had generals question my competence. I've had intelligence officers doubt my reports. I've had commanding officers order me to abandon missions because they didn't believe what I was seeing on the ground. I let that land. Your mockery didn't hurt me. Your laughter didn't diminish me. Because I learned a long time ago that the people who judge loudest usually understand the least. Tiffany's eyes were wet now. She blinked rapidly. What you do with that is up to you, I said. You can go back to performing, you can rebuild your brand and pretend this never happened, or you can actually walk somewhere that challenges you, actually earn something that can't be bought with sponsorship money. I opened my truck door. But don't apologize to me for my benefit. Apologize to yourself for the person you've become, for the person you could have been. I got in the truck, started the engine. The old Toyota rumbled to life. Through the window, I saw Tiffany standing in the parking lot, alone. The other hikers had driven away. The photographer was gone. It was just her and her pristine gear, and the reflection of someone she didn't recognize staring back from her phone screen. I pulled out of the lot and headed for home. 3 weeks later, I received a call from Senator Caldwell's office. The task force had been approved. They needed someone with operational experience to advise on training protocols for the next generation of Special Forces support personnel. The work was classified. The location was D.C. The commitment was 2 days a month. I said yes, not because I needed the recognition, not because I wanted to be seen, but because there were young women and men entering service who would face the same choices I had faced, who would hear the same orders I had heard, who would have to decide in the darkness of hostile territory with wounded teammates and malfunctioning radios what kind of person they wanted to be. They deserved someone who understood. The Senate Intelligence Committee arranged for a small ceremony when I joined the task force. Nothing public, nothing recorded, just a room full of people who had walked similar paths, who had carried similar weights, who understood what it meant to serve in silence. Senator Caldwell presented me with a commendation. The language was careful. Nothing about the Amazon extraction. Nothing about the 9 miles of jungle. Nothing about the direct order I had ignored. Just a formal acknowledgement of 31 years of exceptional service in operational capacities vital to national security. I accepted it. I shook hands. I posed for a single photograph that would go in a file no one outside that room would ever see. Afterward, the senator pulled me aside. I heard from one of my staff, he said, about the influencer, the one from the trail. I raised an eyebrow. She shut down her account, he said. All of it. 200,000 followers. Gone overnight. She posted one final message explaining that she was stepping back to reevaluate what kind of content she wanted to create, what kind of person she wanted to be. I thought about Tiffany in the parking lot, the tears in her eyes, the crack in her carefully curated facade. She enrolled in wilderness first responder training, the senator continued. 8-week program, real skills, real challenges, no cameras allowed. I nodded slowly. You did that, he said. Whatever you said to her that day, it changed something. I didn't do anything, Senator. I just told her the truth. Sometimes that's enough. I returned to my cabin that evening. The tomatoes were ripening. The books were waiting. The Blue Ridge Mountains rolled outward beyond my window in waves of green and blue. I sat on the porch as the sun went down. The challenge coin was in my pocket. The commendation was filed away in a drawer I rarely opened. The memories were where they always were, present permanent, neither forgiven nor forgotten. Silence had always been the language of my life. I had carried it through jungles and deserts and classified operations that would never see the light of day. I had worn it like armor against the mockery of people who measured worth in follower counts and GPS compatible insoles. Now I understood something I hadn't understood before. Silence wasn't the absence of voice, it was the presence of choice, the choice to let others reveal themselves, the choice to wait for the moment when truth would matter more than defense, the choice to walk through places that didn't exist on any map and come back changed in ways no algorithm could measure. Tiffany Marsh had learned something that morning on the Blue Ridge Trail. Not because I had shouted at her, not because I had defended myself, but because I had stayed silent long enough for her to hear the echo of her own cruelty, to see herself reflected in the gap between her performance and my reality. There is power in patience. There is freedom in truth, even if it comes late. There is a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, doesn't demand recognition, doesn't need validation from strangers with expensive gear and empty miles. I work at a secure facility in DC 2 days a month now. No titles on the door, no plaques on the wall, just grace. Just the woman who walks young operators through scenarios they'll face in the field, who teaches them that sometimes the radio fails and the extraction is compromised and the orders don't match the situation on the ground, who teaches them that in those moments they have to decide what kind of person they want to be. I still wear the Danner Mountain Lights 2s, 18 years old, resoled twice, the stain on the left toe that won't come out no matter how many times I treat it. These boots have walked where angels fear to tread, and they're not done yet. If you enjoyed this story about quiet competence winning over loud arrogance, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.